First Coast's most accurate forecast from the First Coast News Weather Team, certified by Weather Rate, sponsored by AC Designs.
Well, Tim, when I walked into work today, I said it didn't feel as hot as we had originally forecasted. We had forecasted for 90 degrees, and when I walked in, I think it was 84, and now we're at 89.
Now, to give yourself credit, I think especially because you've become acclimated, you're becoming a local, you're a runner, I think you're feeling that dew point, you know?
Yeah.
Because let's face it, if we do end up officially make it to 90, now it kind of looks like we will, still there's a difference between a 90-degree day with a 64-degree dew point versus 74, and I really think that's what you're feeling.
Yes.
But
yeah, I'll take the 64 every day of the week.
Yes. But I suspect once we get into deep June, or maybe even next week, right?
Yes. Yeah, it looks like the dew point's going to be on the rise.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, I mean, somewhat or relatively dry air out there today. Perhaps not the case up to the north, Tim. We got the same kind of system that brought us the storms earlier in the week. That is still just kind of swirling around up across the Carolinas, Virginia, the Delmarva area, and into a lot of our big coastal cities, D.C., Philly, New York, all experiencing at least some level of rain. You can see a couple severe thunderstorm warnings there in North Carolina near, let's say, Charlotte, and then also toward Raleigh. Another one near Richmond, Virginia. And then you pointed out to me before we came on here the multitude of flood warnings that they have in effect, not just due to the stuff that's going on right now, but also to the past couple days. So flood watches and warnings across much of Virginia, Maryland, that's kind of in the South mountain range there west of D.C. and into West Virginia there. But then taking an even closer look, Philadelphia and the outskirts in New York there, New Jersey, flash flood warnings.
Flash flood warnings, big deals. And, of course, it's always a big deal. But, for instance, we had that flash flood warning in urban Jacksonville just 2 evenings ago. But at least here it's relatively flat, right? Whereas even in Philadelphia, yeah, coastal, but still, flash flood there is a whole different story, right? And I was looking at a flash flood event that occurred in Western Maryland yesterday, and they had to evacuate some kids from a school because the flash flooding, I'm talking about, in mountainous Maryland, it actually got into the school's 2nd floor, but they got the kids out just in time. Yeah. So I think, and I say that also because except for a few spots around here, flash flooding here is a way different story than up or any place really that has elevation. I mean, I think folks here, unfortunately, could be tragically surprised as how fast that flash flood can come.
Yeah, I would say, especially up north, growing up, in the north and in Pennsylvania, the water in those smaller creeks and streams runs pretty fast, even when it's not raining.
Yeah.
Because it's all draining downstream into, the Susquehanna Valley for where I was from, and then eventually into the Chesapeake Bay. So, yeah, it gets a lot of momentum and steam back behind it when a lot of heavy rain does come down. Which
is probably another reason why sometimes it only takes 6 to 10 inches of moving water like that can take your vehicle off the road.
Exactly. Different story out to the west, though. A wide variety of temperatures across the country. Check out International Falls, Minnesota.
Wow.
Warmer than it is in Jacksonville.
Wow.
Or just as warm.
Yeah.
Pretty distinct line, though, just off to the west. So I think South Dakota paints a very good picture of it. If you're in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, you're probably in the 80s right now. So that's in the eastern part of the state. If you're in Rapid City out towards Mount Rushmore, probably 60s, maybe upper 50s there in Rapid City, and then even colder as you head into Wyoming, Cody, Wyoming, Sheridan, Jackson, 45 degrees there. So we got a huge, what we like to call an omega block, Tim.
Set up across
the country. So this is from a low in the dips, and then a big ridge of high pressure in the middle that kind of gives you that Greek letter omega look to the overall upper level flow, right?
Yeah, and basically Ross is talking about all the way up to about 30,000 feet. So it tends to be some pretty strong, strong systems, and then patterns that don't move real fast. I mean, there might be individual events that move fast, but the overall pattern doesn't move fast at all. I mean, we've basically seen that eastern part of that omega go from Texas to us and now beyond really over the last 7 to 8 days. It probably doesn't take a meteorologist to look at those temperatures that you just showed, Ross, from between International Falls and the Dakotas, and knowing it's still May, to say, that probably means there's a pretty significant event on the way.
On the way, yeah. So that was kind of my next lead. You look at the infrared satellite imagery, you can almost depict where two of those low pressure areas are. So the one that we kind of already talked about there on the East Coast, still just kind of dissipating, it's weakening, but that overall, counterclockwise flow across the New England and mid-Atlantic states here on the eastern seaboard. And then further off to the west, an area we don't often talk about here, especially since we live in Florida, but pretty much right over Yellowstone National Park. Another nice little swirl going on there. That is going to be the source of a pretty significant system that's going to make its way across the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region tomorrow afternoon and evening, bringing potentially widespread severe weather for some folks. So you got a large area of a slight risk, so that's a level 2 out of 5, but also a level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk for areas like Chicago, South Bend, Indiana, all the way
Pope's
through Milwaukee.
hometown.
Yeah,
Man, maybe I'll say some prayers for those in Chicago. But on a serious note, Chicago is what the one of the busiest hubs in the country. So anybody,
travel?
anybody
hub?
flying may want to keep aware of the fact. I mean, I don't think they're going to shut down for a long period of time, but they could certainly have some few-hour delays, and which could then create a domino effect.
Yeah, Chicago, Milwaukee, Green Bay, even Minneapolis is kind of on the fringe there as well. So this is kind of, what it's going to look like as you head into tomorrow afternoon. So you can see where that center of circulation is, moving through South Dakota into southwestern Minnesota. And then here comes a pretty big squall line starting to form during that peak heating of the day. So 4, 5, 6 p.m., right on that western edge of Green Bay, Tim. Or on Wisconsin.
We've talked about the low pressure systems off the Pacific Northwest. This isn't going to be quite like that, but we were talking, and it does look like it's going to go down to about 982 millibars, which for May, it's a pretty deep little low.
Yeah, that's pretty strong. And tail end of this then kind of makes its way down towards us, or not necessarily toward us just yet, but
toward Dixie.
Yeah, Kentucky, Tennessee, northern.
Kind of some signatures of some Bow Echo type events up there.
Yeah,
I mean, at least
they do. I think have a slight risk out for Kentucky and Tennessee on Friday. I'd have to double check that, but I do think they have at least a marginal to slight risk of severe weather there.
But meanwhile, we're south of that, and all that hot air from the Lone Star State continues to advect our way on the surface. Increasingly, moisture coming out of the Gulf.
Yes.
Supports what we've been talking about all week long.
And I think I have a better graphic here to kind of depict that. These are just going through some of the currents out there right now.
So there's a sea breeze at least there now. So for some folks, especially east of 95, there's a sea breeze on the way.
If you live west of 95, though, it is pretty stagnant.
Yeah.
For the most part, just a very, very light west wind. So there's your live temperatures, 87 in both Jacksonville and down in Orange Park. You got 88 in Gainesville, 87 in Waycross. So it'll be close if we hit that 90 mark today, too.
Yeah, we talked about the fact that 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, Cecil hit 91. And we think of Cecil being a hot spot, but winds are still out of the west. So that would certainly imply that even if the airport doesn't get it, certainly neighborhoods on Jacksonville's west side
could
feeling the 90, which is, and this is probably the big point we're trying to make, is this is just the beginning, folks. We're not even close to the peak of this heat event.
Well, and the good thing I think today, right, is that the dew points were a little bit lower.
Yeah.
So your heat index only about 2, maybe 3 degrees warmer
right about there
than what the actual air temperatures were. Model's still trying to depict maybe a pop-up shower along that sea breeze convergence area this afternoon and evening. So we'll watch for that. Probably only 1 or 2, if that, Tim.
And even if it does, I don't think any lightning. Do you?
No, I don't expect any storms. That's why I said a shower.
Yeah.
And it would be a pretty quick light one at that. So otherwise, I'd say 95 to 98% of us stay dry here throughout the rest of this evening.
Now, as you do go through the evening, real quick, I did want to mention that since it would be probably the best night we've had for sky gazing in a while, mostly clear. After the sun sets, we'll have Jupiter in the western sky.
Oh, okay.
And then that big moon, I think it rises about 10:30 tonight.
Okay.
About 97% still.
Did you see the full moon early this morning?
I did, yeah. Yes, sitting there in the southwestern sky. Were you up early enough with Enzo to see that? No.
He tried to wake me up early enough for it, but no.
Yes, I did. It was just barely over the oak trees before it settled on.
When you got to wake up pretty early now to see it with how early the sun rises too.
Yeah, that was about 5:30, I think. Yeah, I think so.
I know Andy back here was definitely still sleeping at that point. No way he was up yet.
I mean, for someone who looks as good as he gets his beauty sleep. You know he does.
This is true. Hey, well, some people like Andy need it, whereas you and I, we're just born like this.
Well, I'm thankful that you're the one at the forecast at 11 o'clock at night, because in all seriousness, as much as I like to think of myself as being healthy and relatively strong, and I'm grateful for that, but man, I'll tell you what, man, it amazes me that I used to do what you're doing. I don't want to even talk about it too much because I don't want to make you tired. But I think you're already beginning.
The eyes are becoming heavier as you speak.
Yeah, because I mean, even as a young guy, which you are, Monday, Tuesday, no big deal. But you're also living life, right? Mm-hmm. And it starts to accumulate as you go through the week.
The afternoon siesta is becoming a must. I think you were the one who sort of taught me that when I first got here. And I'm not a big napper, but today was definitely one of those days of. My dog Enzo and I, we needed to lay down and take a little bit of a nap before coming to work today.
I think it's brilliant. I think if nothing else, especially on busy weather weeks, that at least if psychologically toward the end of the week, you know that, okay, maybe I'm exhausted at 11 o'clock tonight, but maybe the next day I can get a 30-minute nap, at least psychologically, it would definitely give me a lift.
When I remember back to last summer, not to get too off base, but I think the heat also just because it takes it out of you a little bit more, especially if you are active and you're using up more energy running around and stuff outside, or just going for extra walks. You exert a lot more than you think you do with just how hot it is. Makes you more tired. So I think I'm just much more prone to wanting to take a quick little siesta or nap there in the afternoon.
I'm totally with you. I actually had a physics professor from University of North Florida, and I can't give you the exact numbers, but he worked things to joules, like a measurement of energy. And he worked out how when it was heat index was a certain amount above 98.6, right, your body temperature, what your body has to do, how much energy it has to go through to keep your body at 98.6. And so he showed, like in this equation, how you can figure out exactly what you're talking about.
Do you remember how many joules it was?
I'm not even going to attempt. I wouldn't even be close. I got exhausted just listening to him.
Alrighty, well, so we kind of talked about, isolated rain chances tonight, but over the next week, maybe just an isolated chance Sunday or Monday, and we'll get into that. But this is all because, as Tim mentioned, that big ridge of high pressure and the heat really across, Oklahoma, Texas, northern Mexico even, that is going to continue to work its way not only toward us, but over us, and pretty much set up shop here through the weekend. And really even into next week as well. So I like to think it does two things. One, it just continues to bake you in the heat. It doesn't really allow for any big systems to swing on through to kind of break up the temperatures. But it also, I always think it kind of creates a rain shield, almost like a force field over top of you. If you're a Star Wars fan, they use those. It kind of acts like a barrier.
Yep.
So, and you'll notice that here, the WPC's, the Weather Prediction Center's, 7-day outlook for rainfall, it drops off drastically, pretty much from Atlanta over to Birmingham, over to Oxford, Mississippi, everywhere north. Those folks are looking at 1, 2, 3 inches of rain. Everywhere south, who are in that heat dome and the heat bubble, almost nothing.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about having that drought buster is although yes, it's going to be hot this weekend, but because of that upper level high you're talking about, at least we can say, oh, it's good news, it's not going to rain this weekend, or at least for 90% of us, it's not going to rain, except maybe late Sunday.
Yeah, and I think this is the WPC trying to depict that at least a little bit.
Maybe something, yeah.
So
not tomorrow. No rain tomorrow.
Yeah, no rain tomorrow. The morning should be pretty nice, kind of similar to what we saw here today. Yeah. But it'll warm up very quickly. So by lunchtime, you're talking mid-80s. So if you're someone who likes to eat lunch outside, tomorrow might be one of those days that you walk out and you're like, whew, I maybe didn't even need to put this food in the microwave. Could have let it just sit out in the sun.
Could be sundress weather.
Yes, yeah. Very, very good point. Yeah,
not sure how good we're going to feel in our coat and ties.
Sweaty. Well, I'm always sweaty, let's be honest. But yeah, low, mid-90s tomorrow. Pretty much for nearly all of us, pretty much just the beaches are going to be a little bit cooler.
Yeah.
What would you say? How many blocks in do you have to be?
Well,
or west of the intercoastal?
Well, we're reaching that time of the year to where and it'll be variations to where, whereas inland areas, especially with the west wind, we might not get our actual official high until like 3 to 5. Out around the beaches, you may have your high at about 11:30 or noon. And then the sea breeze comes in. So it could be, like you say, the beaches could almost make it to lower 90s tomorrow. In fact, that's what I'm forecasting. But then by 3 in the afternoon, the sea breeze comes in. Now, I think it's going to be strong out of the south and southeast. So you're right. I don't think it's going to get real far inland. But if you're within, certainly, I think by tomorrow afternoon, if you're A1A toward the beaches, then nice breeze out there. In fact, I think it's going to be the kind of weekend to where until very late in the afternoon, you could be 5 blocks off the beach and it's still middle 90s, whereas on the beach there might be a 20-knot south-southeast wind.
Trying to cool you off a good bit.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about this, you look over in the Gulf Coast, southwest of Lake City, you can see the temperature contour much cooler thanks to that, southwest breeze and the sea breeze for all of us here in northeast Florida and southeast Georgia.
But that's also why, as you've been noting, that even though that high pressure ridge is going to be over us at the surface, slowly but surely, we're going to have moisture increasing from both the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. So those mid-90s are going to start feeling even hotter, obviously, as we get toward the weekend and beyond.
Like upper 90s and triple digits even. Yeah, so just talking air temperature. So actual air temperature, I would say this is a record-breaking weekend, perhaps. At the very least, near record or record-tying temperatures. You can see them there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. All 3 days really have the potential to at least tie, if not break the records. And then even into early next week, we might be close a couple of days. But nonetheless, it is going to be steamy, whether you are, at the town center shopping this weekend in St. Augustine, or, up in Waycross, or maybe you are out there at the beaches town center.
Dancing in the street. I'm trying to think of that band. What was that famous? That was a popular pop song from the '60s. You've probably heard it as well. Dancing in the streets. And they talk about dancing in Philly and Detroit. And who is that? Who does?
Is that the one that goes something like that?
Pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Andy, I would have liked an applaud back there for the musical.
Andy's not listening.
He's not at all.
Andy has drifted. While you have this up.
Yeah.
Folks who maybe have watched us over the last couple of days, we really haven't changed the forecast much, but maybe we tweak it a degree or two. So for fellow forecasters out there, you might wonder, what are we adjusting? What are we looking at? Of course, today we have all kind of computer models. I can tell you old school, Ross, before we had what we have now, was if nothing else, we would go to try to figure out what we thought temperatures would be at 850. And then if we could figure out temperatures at 850, then we would try to forecast from there, because anything a little closer to that, then you're having interaction between inversions developing and mixing during the afternoon. So even to this day, as you know, because I yell it out all the time, I still tend to look at what's happening at 850. For those of you at home that are fellow forecasters but you don't follow heights, 850 is at about 5,000 feet. So in other words, we're trying to figure out if we can figure out about what the temperature is at 5,000 feet, and we know we're going to have sunshine, then we start thinking about 30 degrees, maybe not quite, depending on different situations. So so as an example, our 5,000 foot temperature is going from about 55 this morning, maybe 53, and then forecasting it to go to like 64 to 65 tomorrow, and maybe approaching 70 this weekend. So if you do the math, and we're thinking 30 degrees at max, you can see why we're really kind of being conservative. I loved how you said this is looking to be a record-breaking weekend, Ross, because we've been through many situations where our actual forecast are like within a degree or two under the record, but out of humility we say, hey, near record, because we could be off by a degree or two, but it's normally on like the low side, whereas as you've shown, our forecast is, if not at the record, but maybe a degree above. It's going to be interesting to see how. I will not be surprised at all for our heat boxes like Cecil to get upper 90s.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then you think about the real field temperature there.
Right. That's Mayport. I think Mayport, we're going to go over 100 at Mayport. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mayport, you might even see, like you said, maybe 104 out there. Yeah. Feels like temperatures.
And that's why Tim and I have kind of talked about it, here in some of our editorial meetings. And then we are also going to have a weather impact alert for the weekend as well due to this. the heat index will kind of be, how do I want to say it? Anywhere really between about 100 to 104 across the board. So not everyone's going to see it 104 heat index or real field temperature. So this is specifically just for Jacksonville at the airport. Low triple digits, really anywhere from about 100 to 102. But yeah, I think Mayport's a very good spot. You get some of those higher dew points.
Yeah, near the water, really, anywhere.
Yeah, near the water, and just still the very high heat. That could be one of the spots that gets very, very steamy. So once you get above 102, I do want to point this out, you get into that extreme caution category. Now, this is all based off of the National Weather Service. So really, once you get past that, you really want to be, trying to stay as safe and as careful as you possibly can. So because of that, as I had just said, we do have that weather impact alert Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, and Sunday afternoon. You want to try and hydrate as much as possible today, tomorrow, Friday, all days here. Just have that extra glass of water before bed, right?
Yeah, hydrate means water. I know the sports drinks are hip, but
you really don't need the extra sugar in a lot of those.
You don't need sugar, and I guess some of the sports drinks have cacaffeine too, right?
A lot of them do. The energy drinks and stuff.
So that mixture, I can only imagine what it's doing to your system. If you're dancing in the streets at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we've made this point before, but I don't think we can make it too much. For those of you who are locals, if we were coming up on a weekend from mid-June to mid-August and we were talking about these temperatures, we'd be saying hot, but we would not be saying a weather impact alert. But because it is just May, especially the first half of May, and we haven't had an event like this, and they are records, that relatively speaking, that's why we're making a big deal about this.
Yeah, and that's why we're also not going to extend it into next week more than likely, unless those heat indices push up closer to 105, 106, 107. Then we might have to have that discussion. But
right.
Yeah, at least for the time being, just keeping it for the weekend. That's when the most folks are going to be out and about,
outside,
running around. So try and stay cool. Stay in front of the fan or the AC as much as you can here. If you don't like the heat, Tim, rain chances on Sunday, you think?
Well, like we said, so maybe late in the day or evening, southeastern Georgia, isolated.
Something to look forward to. Take care.